wants another stimulus. He wants to hire more government workers. He says we need more firemen, more policemen, more teachers. Did he not get the message of Wisconsin? The American people did. It's time for us to cut back on government and help the American people.
Well, do you think Governor Romney is talking about getting rid of more teachers and firemen?
No, I think in the end, the big issue is that the private sector still needs more help, and the answer is not more big government. I know in my state, our reforms allowed us to protect firefighters, police officers, and teachers. That's not what I think when I think of big government. I think of the bigger sense is more government regulations, more stimulus, more things that take money out of the private sector and put it in the hands of the government.
Hey, welcome back. Exactly. Try that in Pensacola. Welcome back to Morning Joe. On the set with us now, Republican Senator from Wyoming, Senator John Barrasso. By the way, that laughing had nothing to do with every clip that we played before. So Mika came in from the south of France just to visit us.
So nice.
Yes,
we miss her today.
She passed out like encrusted jewels and then walked back off.
She gave the queenly wave and off she went.
She did, and then off she went again. So anyway, so what do you think, Senator? What do you think about the Ryan budget and all this talk about how Republicans are against firefighters and teachers, and that there's some pretty massive cuts in there that would hurt?
I want a healthy economy. I want to get people back to work. And you saw the president on Friday make a statement that he said the private sector is doing fine, and it is not. But he was unscripted, wasn't reading from the teleprompter. I think that's what he believes, and that's Americans get the fact that they still have 8.2% unemployment. If they have kids like I do, you worry about your kids being able to get jobs. Kids are coming out of school with huge debt, and yet the president's, running around college campuses. Those kids can't find work. And a month ago, for every one person that found a job, 3 people gave up looking.
David?
Well, I think politicians make mistakes. They have cock-ups in unscripted moments, and Nicole and I were just talking about that very press conference. It was a bad press conference. He made a mistake, said something I don't think he really believes. I think he is very realistic about the economy. I don't think he believes it any more than Mitt Romney thinks that a person and a corporation are the exact same thing. People say things unscripted that they may or may not apologize for later in the day, and I think the president had his lieutenants rush to the cameras and say, of course, we understand that the economy is where it is.
Nicole?
We were talking in the break about how when you are running for re-election and you have a campaign and you use the president as your messenger, it is really not a good idea to do it in the White House briefing room. If you want to use the president, because the president running for re-election has to do both jobs, right? You're president, but you're also trying to win an election with all the same challenges, and in this case, more than he had 4 years ago. But you never send your candidate, who's also the president, into the White House briefing room to deliver a political message. And so I think that's why they stepped in it. And I think if you want him to deliver a political message, have a rally in Northern Virginia. But you don't send your president, who is the leader of a country in very difficult times in a very strained economy, to the White House briefing room to deliver a political message.
Well, you just said he has to do both jobs, be the candidate and be the president.
Right.
Barack Obama is not being the president right now. There is no presidential leadership that we see on Capitol Hill.
And you feel it, right? I mean, there's a lack of leadership. We're not able to. There is a lot of, despite the impression of Washington, there actually is bipartisan agreement that some things have to get done. There are Republicans and Democrats who believe that tax reform should happen. Without presidential leadership, none of these things happen.
Senator, one of the argument that the president put forward a jobs bill, and it, for the most part, just lay there.
Well, the president is focused not on the whole economy, but on a government-based economy. We need to get people back to work, and you see, he could put people back to work immediately with the Keystone.
Bill, though? What was the jobs
well,
bill?
He had his little checklist of do this and do that and then do the next thing, but it had to do with basically spending more money, raising taxes to do it, and he could get jobs created immediately by approving the Keystone XL pipeline. Doesn't do it. The onerous regulations that are coming out of the EPA are making it harder to get people back to work. There's so much uncertainty about the cost of the health care law. Our tax is going to go up, the fiscal cliff that we're heading to, and yet Harry Reid, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, started off the year by briefing 40 members of the House to say, don't worry, our plan for the year, he said, is a new electoral strategy. He said, forget passing bills. The Democrats just want to play the blame game in 2012. Put up bills that don't get voted on.
So, David, Harry Reid obviously is trying to kill certain bills. Mitch McConnell has
Nothing's happening between now and November.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell has said his #1 goal was to stop the president. This happens, and unfortunately it happens on both sides. I want to ask you, though, about a longer trend, and that is the trend of president as campaigner-in-chief. We're seeing it here, and I'm hearing a lot of Democrats saying several months ago, this president sort of threw in the towel on getting things done, and he's running a political campaign. He's not the first president to do that. The Bush, under Rove, the Bush administration was great in it. I remember in 1999 when we were moving towards election. And seriously, I started reading Greek and Roman history because I knew I could do my job.
You probably finished it all.
I did. I knew that I would be sitting on the floor hearing a lot of maneuvering, but I could actually learn something the next couple of years while I was stuck on the floor.
I think nothing infuriates people more than this.
It keeps getting worse, though. It's worse now than it's ever been, and it's going to be worse whoever the next president is.
And it's not just between now and November. I think that the kind of constantly pushing huge problems down the road, the denial of these problems, take the problem that we have that may be arguably the worst problem we have. Not of an individual war, and God knows we have many of those, or Syria and all over the world. But the fact that the globe is heating up, the fact that scientists nearly unanimously, if not unanimously, agree on this trend, the fact that this will lead to the loss of millions and millions of jobs and displace tens of millions of people on continents all over the world, the ramifications of warming are clear. And not 500 years from now, but for our children and our grandchildren. And we defer this and defer this and defer this at our own peril. I don't see the Senate or the House or the President or anyone of authority doing anything on this. This can is kicked down the road. And this is indicative of so many problems that we have. We have a crisis of power.
And speaking of cans being kicked down the road, the president at the beginning of his term said he wasn't going to kick the debt can down the road. He wasn't going to kick Social Security down the road, Medicare down the road. If the President of the United States called you up today and said, Senator, I've decided I'm going to listen to my debt commission, and I'm going to go and put that back on the floor, and I'm going to be a champion of it, and I'm going to support it, and I'm not going to leave anybody hanging out in the wind. If the President asked you for his support, a vote up or down for that Simpson-Bowles debt commission, would you support it?
I'd want to have a debate on it. I'd want to say, look, raising taxes on anybody right now isn't a great idea. Bill Clinton has just said that. Right. Larry Summers has said it.
But what if Democrats and Republicans alike can say we won't raise taxes for a couple of years until the GDP goes up to 3 or 4? I mean, would you be willing to work with the president to pass Simpson-Bowles under some circumstances?
Well, you know, Al Simpson is from Wyoming. He was in the Senate before me, and I visit with him quite frequently. I'll be with at the rodeo with him in Cody on the 4th of July, and I always listen to Al. Now, I'm not necessarily irrelevant, and irrelevant. Would you? I will work with the
it?
president. I don't know how I'd vote on that, depending on the debate, the discussion, and the amendments. I'm not going to vote to raise taxes on anybody right now, but I would welcome presidential leadership on all of the things you just talked about.
But if Republicans and Democrats came together, and let's say, for instance, I'll come out. Listen, I never voted for a tax increase in my life. Never did. And I'm very proud of it. But I'll be the first to say, if Democrats would come to the table with a plan to save Medicare over the next generation, a plan to save Social Security over the next generation, a plan to cut defense spending over the next generation, a plan to get us out of decade-long occupations over the next generation, and they needed to reform the tax code to make it flatter and fairer, but it would increase more revenue.
Increase overall revenue.
Bring more money into the federal government.
Get more people working.
I'd support that in a second. Would you?
Absolutely. You get more revenue in by having more people working, and the tax reform. I mean, that's the way you raise revenue. You don't go after you and you and you. You actually raise overall revenue by having more people working, more people paying taxes, and a more productive economy, which we don't have right now at 8.2% unemployment and kids living back in their parents' basements because they can't find work graduating from college.
Let me ask you this: if we take care of long-term debt, if we take care of the long-term debt with Social Security, take care of the long-term debt with Medicare, take care of long-term debt by reducing the scope of U.S. military spending globally. Is it okay for us to spend more money on infrastructure?
Oh, you have the money to spend.
Is it okay to spend more money on R&D?
You have all those opportunities.
Is it okay to spend more money on education?
The revenue is coming in, absolutely.
So you're in the caucus. You're in the Scarborough Republican caucus that says if China's investing in it, we need to invest in it, except we need to beat their butts. You're in that caucus, right?
And we need to quit borrowing money from China because we don't want to be indebted to them. We're borrowing $2 million
so we take care,
every minute.
We take care of, and we're doing this, ladies and gentlemen, with heads bowed and all eyes closed. We're doing this one at a time. So we can do two things at once. We can take care of the long-term debt while investing short-term in our economy, right? By rebuilding our infrastructure, by rebuilding our schools, by investing in R&D, by doing the sort of things we need to do to beat the Chinese, to beat the Indians, to beat the Saudis. We can do that as a nation, right?
Yeah, by raising overall revenue, by getting more people back to work, by getting rid of a lot of the regulations that are coming out of Washington.
Taking care of the long-term, taking care of the long-term debt.
Well, that's what we need to focus on. You talked about the Beatles earlier, 50 years ago today. The Beatles started.
Yeah.
50 years ago this year, John Kennedy, in his State of the Union, said that persistently large deficits, he said, endanger our economic future. At the time, the deficit that year was $7 billion.
Yeah.
The deficit this year was almost 200 times that number. We're only talking 50 years, the lifetime of the Beatles.
Yeah. Senator, thank you for being with us.
George Harrison, the tax man. He wrote a song, The Tax Man, just about this.
All right, coming up, bad habits may be